More than 60% of Africa's 1.2 billion people live in rural areas. Most of these people in rural areas are dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. So Africa's economy is inherently dependent on agriculture. More than 32% of the continent's gross domestic product comes from the agricultural sector. And food from agriculture accounts for 2/3 of the household budget for poor Africans. However, agricultural productivity still remains far from developed world standards. Over 90% of agriculture depends on rainfall with no artificial irrigation. The techniques used to cultivate the soil are still far behind from what we've seen being adopted in Asia and the Americas and other developing parts of the world. We are not only lacking in irrigation, but also behind in things like fertilizers, how we use pesticides, and access to high-yield seeds. Agriculture in Africa also experiences basic infrastructure problems such as getting access to markets and things like financing. And the low productivity levels of agriculture in Africa have resulted in a very, very difficult situation. The continent cannot meet the growing demands for food as the population grows and as it urbanizes. As a result, Africa as a region is increasingly dependent on food imports. Now, for a continent with such a vast area in terms of land, with a booming young population, a tropical climate, it's surprising that Africa is not a net exporter of agricultural products. In the 1970s, Africa provided about 8% of the world's total agricultural exports. Today, this number has dropped to a negligible 2%. The African continent spent $35 billion importing food in 2011, and that's excluding fish. And only 5% of this was intra-African trade. So an increase in productivity matched with the right set of policies and investment could reverse the situation. Africa could replace these imports with its own produce, which could in turn reduce poverty, enhance food and nutrition security, and provide sustainable growth to the respective societies. What's needed is a broader economic transformation to shift the current paradigm facing agriculture on the continent. Now, in most cases across other regions of the world, urbanization and economic growth have resulted in new opportunities for local agricultural producers. However, in Africa, this share of the market mainly belongs to foreign companies. Imports of food staples have been rising sharply, and domestic agriculture has so far failed to increase supply in response.